This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Zoned Properties.
With the cannabis industry now licensing projects in over 35 states medicinally and or recreationally, market projections suggest that the real estate opportunity related to cannabis could boast a total addressable market of over $50 billion in projected growth. Zone Properties is redefining the commercial real estate development process with tailored services for the emerging cannabis market. From securing real estate and project development to opportunities for expansion, Zone Properties helps clients maximize their cannabis real estate investment and mitigate risk. Zone Properties has a full spectrum of integrated real estate growth services for highly regulated industries, which includes advisory services, brokerage services, and investment services. Zone Properties has also created strategic partnerships to streamline your cannabis real estate projects, which includes retail franchise opportunities, property technology and data solutions, and engineering and construction experts. Let Zone Properties help you navigate regulatory nuances and launch your cannabis real estate project. Call them today at 1-877-360-8839. Again, that's 877-360-8839, or email them at clients@zonedproperties.com or visit their website at zonedproperties.com to learn more and receive a free project success checklist. Zoned Properties, targeted real estate intelligence for highly regulated industries. Dan Muller, what's up, man? How are you?
Doing great, Kevin. Great to be with you today.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you on the show. We're gonna have a great conversation this evening. Want to talk to you about your role as founder and CEO of AeroPay, but before we do that, Dan, tell me a little bit about your background. I know you spent 10 years in digital product innovation, and there's always that light bulb moment, I feel like, within this
Yes.
industry as people kind of enter, and you're a founder of this company. So why don't you walk us through that journey? What happened?
Yeah. So really quick overview on me. My background's in product and engineering for large retail solutions, retail and digital brand solutions. So I spent, like you said, over 10 years working on projects for companies like Best Buy, BB Express, Foot Locker, and many more, and really got firsthand experience through that work, understanding what it would take to build large enterprise retail digital solutions. And one of the hardest parts of every project would always be, facilitating money movement, right? You'd think it's an easy, well-known, established aspect of any project, but when you peel back the layers, you really start to see kind of how legacy everything is, how broken it is behind the scenes. And when looking at that, there are a few ways to solve it, right? You can make that process a lot easier, or you can create a new one altogether. So based on that experience and my know-how to build product from the ground up, I started AeroPay with the simple thesis that you could create a much better digital payment method through a bank transfer, right? Allowing a customer to easily connect to their bank. The same for the business after going through some good compliance, and then create a transfer directly from a customer's account to a business's account, resulting in a few major benefits, right? Saving on the interchange, saving on the fee, the processing fee, reducing the latency, so making it much faster to settle, right? Because we know kind of cards and other methods take 3 to 7 days, and reducing the type of security risk that you might have with a card or cash or checks. So that's really the origin story. Founded in 2017, we're Chicago based. Really proud of that as well. And we found a really good mix for the cannabis industry and vertical, and happy to talk more about how we landed there, and how we operate in cannabis. But the thesis is a perfect fit for an underserved industry in payments, which is cannabis, and we're really excited about our growth there.
Yeah, totally underserved with tons of hurdles and challenges that these operators face. And I do want to talk to you about, specifically AeroPay's role, in the cannabis space. But before we do, I'm just curious, going back to your journey and that light bulb moment, was cannabis a prior passion that you had, or, was this just kind of a opportunity on the business side where you said, hey, like you said, this is an underserved kind of area where the cannabis industry needs help?
So one of the main aspects of AeroPay right at the beginning was that we were going to help businesses where they're feeling the pain the most, right? So when we founded it in 2017, built an alpha product, released it in the greater Chicago area, and released it to just local businesses in our neighborhoods and communities, and realized that the reaction was so favorable because we're bringing something brand new that helps those businesses grow, and then in turn creates a better experience for consumers. They were discounting to try to get them to pay with this method. We just took that sentiment and applied it to by far the most underserved vertical. And there's a general affinity, right? You may go to your local coffee shop, your local deli, the business owners, right? Or your bar, and the bartender, and you have that affinity, right? So we took that affinity from that customer to the business and found out that there's that same affinity. Not only is it underserved from a solution standpoint, but there's the same affinity between the consumer and their bud tender and their local dispensary, right? So we found a really good fit. It was very deliberate. We knew we wanted to launch in cannabis, but realized, you're going to have to invest a lot in the technology, invest a ton in the relationships with financial institutions, in compliance and regulatory approach to actually make something like that happen, because it's so widely known that payments in this industry for such a long time have been, workarounds, masking, gray area items that, haven't been the most transparent and compliant. So we really wanted to change that too.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's go a little deeper with this. Let's talk specifically about some of the issues and pain points that cannabis operators face on the day-to-day basis when it comes to payments, right? And payment processing. So tell me a little bit about, those examples, and specifically how AeroPay addresses and helps, customers navigate through those issues.
Yeah, I mean, I think you'd have to say the cash management equation is just a huge monster pain, right? It's something they all deal with. It's something they can't get around, whether that's standard dispensary payments or B2B. Trying to kind of remove the cash burden away from these operators is, I think, like challenge number one. Then number two is, how do you create a normalized experience, right? Omni-channel from traditional enterprise retail, so that the consumer can pay for cannabis wherever they are. Are they at home waiting for delivery and store pickup? Are they at the store, right? You want to give them a normalized kind of buying experience with the same digital tools that they may use outside cannabis. So realizing that cash is a burden, consumers want that experience, you have to be able to provide something that does and solves for those two things really well while stays compliant, right? So you saw the recent news with Visa warning against cashless ATMs, because that's what operators and their customers have been used to for so long, right? I'm going to round up, I'm going to add a fee, there's a cap about how much I can spend. There should be none of those things, right? You should be able to spend out of as much as you want based on the state legal limit. You should be able to buy from home. You should be able to, have a really good, fluid, and fast settlement experience for the business. So we took kind of those two major problems and built our product experience to go one step beyond it, so that it's really slick and smooth.
Well, and then, I would also imagine, I hear this is a common term, I guess, within the technology space, and that's open architecture, right? And
Yes.
for those that are, watching this episode, not listening, sorry for those that are listening. I want to show you the definition that I pop up when I type in open architecture in Google, and it says here, a type of computer architecture or software architecture intended to make adding, upgrading, and swapping components with other computers easy. So tell me a little more about open architecture, how AeroPay plays a role in that, and maybe some other differentiators, that AeroPay has when it comes to its solutions compared to its competitors?
Yeah, so when you're a business owner, you have vendors, solutions, different systems that you either have to buy or build or put together. There are a few approaches in how you can put your business operation system together. What we generally believe is when you're choosing the best of the best of each ancillary tech provider, then you're getting the domain expertise, you're getting the best pricing, especially good outcome if they're working together and there's really deep integrations. But really what you're getting is that sole focus where all that company does is deliver what they promise, right, in their domain, as opposed to closed architecture where there might be a suite of different systems smashed together and basically promised as one seamless solution, but really isn't behind the scenes, right? So again, being transparent about what's there, choosing the domain expert, and then from a commercial standpoint, you have the right to independently negotiate with each one of those providers. So that's on a business side, but simply in software, you always want open architecture because you can take that module and refine it and customize it, right? So now think again, back to business, you have that module, you want to refine it, customize it, make it better. You're working with the experts in that space. So we think open architecture, both on the technical side as well as general like business operation side, is the right solution long term. And we're excited to be a part of that story as it gets applied to cannabis.
I would imagine that, yeah, I mean, open architecture seems like the right move, especially within the cannabis industry, which compliance, regulation, I mean, it's always ever evolving and changing, right? So
Exactly.
you have to get that initial module, like you said, and then continue to build upon it as that new legislation or those policies roll out.
Yeah.
Uh, and
You
and
have,
go
yeah.
ahead, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I just wanted to add to your point because you have state regulation, you have federal, you've got, different components within payments, within e-commerce, within point of sale or seed to sale tracking. And, to your point, I think you want the group that's most informed in that domain, and then you can partner with them to stay ahead of the curve from a product standpoint. So just agree with what you said.
And to that point, I mean, is that AeroPay's real differentiator? I mean, when it comes to this space, is that you've kind of seen what traditional legacy payment processors do and how they won't touch cannabis, and how you've kind of sidestepped them and worked directly with, the local and state municipalities to kind of figure this out and get it done? Or, I mean, what's your method here?
Yeah, so our key partner in all of this is our financial institution, right? So we can't do what we do without their support. In this case, it's Safe Harbor Financial, who's one of the pioneers and trailblazers of financial services in cannabis, right? So they've created rules by which to safely bank the space. They provide payroll services. They help enable payment processing, and we are a technology layer, an advanced one that really layers on top of those financial institutions, right? So we're extremely compliant because they help develop the rules by which we can serve the space together with them. On top of which they help us communicate with regulators. We go out and communicate with regulators on our own, right? So compliance, and onboarding and working with the financial institutions, those to us are table stakes, right? You can't be a compliant provider without those things. Where we see ourselves differentiate even beyond that is having a modern technology stack, being able to easily integrate with all the other parties involved, right? Your POSs, your iHeartChain e-commerce platforms, Blackbird services, Ola as well. We want to make sure we're integrated with the best of the best players so that if you're a business, you can easily switch these things on. So that's open architecture coming again into play with how we actually help distribute and make it an easy answer for the businesses. The other thing is just some basic blocking and tackling in fintech. We don't collect any social security numbers or any sensitive personal information to onboard into our service. We are, as fast as you could possibly get from a transaction standpoint, because we're running on same day ACH. So there's a series of things that we think are must-haves, and then there's kind of little pluses along the way.
Okay, yeah, no, that provides a lot of clarity. I appreciate you explaining that. And
Of
let's
course.
talk about your footprint, right? So tell us a little bit about your customer base, where you predominantly serve your customers and what all that looks like.
Yeah, so we're located in nearly every med and rec state. We do, the major California delivery firms like Muse. We're working with Green Thumb Industries on a national rollout. We're in every dispensary in Illinois. We do a bunch of dispensaries in, Washington, Michigan, obviously Colorado as well. So the footprint's pretty large at this point. We're growing a ton week over week. I think one of the things we keep hearing like is a resounding kind of sigh of relief when I say the same things to the operators that I'm telling you, right? It sounds simple, but they've heard the stories before, and then poof, the payment processors they've heard it before are gone, right? And I think the reassurance that we're a long-term, stable, scalable partner with them is a huge differentiator. So that's one thing that enables our growth quickly to all of those markets.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, hey, consistency is a good thing, right? If you're telling the
Yeah,
same story,
yeah,
it
yeah.
shows that you're consistent in your mission. And you mentioned partners like I Heart Jane. I've had Socrates on, who's a great guy, and smart business owner. I mean, so yeah. I mean, do you want to talk about any other partnerships or maybe specifically that one?
Yeah, so that's one that we're recently being extremely vocal about because we're really proud of all the hard work that both teams have put in. We've got technical integrations, but also I'd say cultural alignment when it comes to how to support merchants and dispensaries and MSOs. We feel as though their business is a major priority. So seeing a win as a result of working together is pivotal. And it's been just a pleasure, to work with them. I think one of the things that I would say was really challenging as we entered cannabis was who to talk to, who's done it the right way versus who's not. And clearly right away, Simon and the team at Jane were, heads and shoulders above where we saw other folks. And we wanted to work with them from the earliest days of entering cannabis, and we made that happen. So we're really proud of that working relationship, and we think it's going to grow a ton in 2022.
That's great. No, that's awesome. I want to switch gears now and talk a little bit about the elephant in the room, I guess you could put it, for this month, and that is safe banking, not being included in the NDAA in its final passage. So tell me a little bit about the low hanging fruit here, safe banking, and its impact, particularly in the space that you play in, which is payment processing.
Yeah, so I think when we look at legislation, we hope that there's more openness, awareness, and action, right? But ultimately, there are providers in the real world, in the industry, that are providing financial services to growing cannabis businesses, right? So I think there's this sense that, it's a waiting game until something happens on that side of things, which may open the doors to more larger institutions to kind of insert themselves into the cannabis space. But in the meantime, there's some really great companies and banks filling the void. So, there are guidelines by which the federal government says, if you're going to bank the space, make sure you do these things, and it's safe to bank it, right? You need to make sure you're doing a cannabis license check, that they're following state guidelines, on-site checks, in the dispensaries themselves, SARS and CTRs, which are reports to the federal regulators and monitors. So as long as you're doing these things, you can safely bank the space. And again, Safe Harbor Financial, huge shout out to them because they actually help, work on, based on these guidelines, work on providing programs that other regional banks could now bank the space. So I think in short, it doesn't matter too much in the interim. It might, prevent the biggest names that you know of to provide business banking, but there are good banks in each med and rec region already banking the space safely and appropriately.
I mean, and who, what does their client base look like? I mean, are they big MSOs that these banks are working with, or is it across the board? Does that include small to medium sized businesses as well, or even
Y- y-
startups?
Yeah, all of those, right? So MSOs, small, single store dispensaries, ancillary tech, in the early days, if you even touched the space, right, you couldn't get a bank account. And even today, we see folks across the board, they're like, oh, I got shut down here, so I'm now over there, or I'm telling one of the big national banks that I'm something else, and we're saying, no, you got to get a cannabis compliant bank. That's kind of what you have to do for us, at least. That has to happen. So it's really across the board. I would say the multi-state operators have really sound larger, I'd say mid to larger size FIs, financial institutions and banks already working with them, banking them in many of the states that they're already in. And then you're starting to see kind of like the even kind of larger, but not the biggest, right? 10 big names that you can think of are starting to create programs. They're creating cannabis banking programs. And again, all based on the FinCEN 2014 safe banking guidelines, right? So it's not a safe banking act, but there are guidelines by which federal government isn't necessarily going to pursue, negative action. So I think that's the one thing that I, really want to tell the wider audience and market is that there's really sound, trustworthy bankers, fintechs, ancillary tech providers already providing many of these services.
It's good to hear. Yeah. Well, as we wrap up, Dan, I want to ask you, pull out your crystal ball and, you know, aside from in the future, cannabis businesses being able to operate, by not simply using cash, right? And actually like across the nation being able to bank. Where do you see this going? What does the future of banking and payments look like?
So my prediction is that the most underserved industries attract people that like to solve really hard problems because it's a lot easier to stay complacent and safe and work in an industry that the problem's been solved for many, many years, right? It's all greenfield. The things that we're doing every single day haven't been done before in the way that we're doing them because cannabis wasn't really a thing. Every day it evolves and evolves and evolves and evolves, right? And so the prediction that I've shared a few times is that I think cannabis and the tech providers within cannabis could potentially leapfrog the incumbent, tech or payments providers in the future because we're forced to. We have to think about better ways to speed up onboarding and compliance and monitoring and risk measurement and fast settlement. For example, we guarantee payments where we make sure that the business is made whole on every transaction. We think the concept of chargebacks is really kind of dated and it shouldn't be on the business to pay for declined payments. That concept, would not be a thing outside of this type of industry that's really open to exploring new ways of doing things. So we think that there's going to be a push outward into the mainstream after cannabis tech payments financial services providers sort of set the standard for how things could be. And so that's kind of the big idea. It's our big hope. There's a lot of work to be done to get there, but I think with the right partnerships and the MSOs kind of pushing and leading the way, we can get there.
Yeah, no, it's super exciting, and it just points to yet another example of this burgeoning industry, you know, providing the opportunity for the operators within the industry to be at the forefront of doing things differently.
Exactly.
I mean, financial services, you've got that. We've talked on this podcast about HR and completely kind of changing culture, right? And the way in which people work in a corporate environment, which can for some people be very, high anxiety and lots of pressure and acting a certain way that's not natural, to kind of your human instinct. So it's exciting, man. It's a great kind of time to be in the industry, and it's really exciting, and it's been informative to hear all the great things that AeroPay is doing as they provide these financial services. So, Dan, I want to leave the floor with you. Anything else on your mind before we wrap up here?
Yeah, just say, look out for some big things coming from us in the early part of the year. We've got many exciting projects, partnerships, new clients that we're working with that we're excited to talk about pretty soon. We've always been a really accessible company. So, feel free to reach out to me directly anytime. Daniel@aeropay.com is my email. Shoot us a note on socials or the site. And that's another thing that we just want to be really open and receptive to any questions or thoughts about this thing. I think traditionally payments and providers have always been a little bit mysterious, right? What's behind the fold? We don't know. And so we really want to take an opposite tact with that, and excited to expand on our partnerships, like a Blackbird in Nevada delivery is a big push for us coming pretty soon. So we're excited about the things coming in the new year, and hope you guys follow along.
That's great. No, yeah, we definitely will be following along, Dan. And as you guys continue to grow and expand your footprint and establish new partnerships, let's get you back on so we can talk more about it. All right.
I'd love that. That'd be great.
Yeah, no, that sounds good. I look forward to it. Thank you again. And thank you all for listening. Bye.